Hello and welcome back. I'm Gardener Ben and welcome along to the North Lodge Cottage Garden. One of the largest questions I get asked online, both on Instagram and of course on YouTube, are which roses you can grow if you only have partial sun or if you're working in dappled shade. The next collection of roses are 6 roses, all by David Austin Roses, which are going to offer you a wonderful selection of colour and form and fragrance, all working really hard if you only have several hours of direct sunlight every day. Don't forget, every rose you're just about to see has its own personal rose review by myself. They're available to watch either on Instagram or YouTube. If you have any problems finding the media you're looking for, don't hesitate to drop me a comment and I will point you in the right direction if any of the roses captivate your attention and you need to know more. So here we go, 6 roses for growing in dappled shade or partial sunlight, receiving between 4 and 5, maybe 6 hours worth of sunlight per day, and all still performing really well. The first rose I'm going to talk to you about is actually Port Sunlight. A beautiful apricot rose only reaching around 3 to 3.5 feet tall and free flowering. This particular rose will actually perform really well in fairly deep shade, receiving maybe 3 or 4 hours worth of sunlight per day. Doesn't matter if it's morning or afternoon, it doesn't really mind. It does prefer its feet to be a little on the wet side. It does, if it dries out and gets too much sun, suffer with a little bit of black spot and mould and mildew and go into a little bit of stress. So a little bit of shade in the garden is really perfect for Port Sunlight, where its blooms really do come alive in dappled shade. It has very dark emerald green foliage and really interesting and beautiful dark orange buds with a beautiful red streak up the side. The blooms open completely flat and have this deep rosetted texture to them and a lovely bleaching to the outside of the flower. So this is Port Sunlight, the first of 6 roses from David Austin, all perfect for growing in shade. The next one, making several collections, this one is Scarborough Fair, a hard-working, tough and resilient rose which will perform really well if you can only give it around 4 hours worth of direct sunlight per day. It's a small and compact plant, only reaching around 3 feet, and it will take salt wind, it will take a little bit of dry, and it'll also take you not looking after it very well. So the next one in the collection is Scarborough Fair. No surprise that this gentleman is in this collection. This beauty is Roald Dahl. Absolutely perfect for growing in dappled shade where it's only going to reach and receive around 4 or 5 hours worth of sunlight per day. It's a beautiful rose with these lovely apricot blooms and very dark apricot buds with a very golden glowing back to them. A fabulous rose for growing in a dark spot if you're working on a north or east aspect where it's only going to get direct sunlight for in the morning or in the afternoon, and also perfect for growing in a pot. So this one is Roald Dahl. 2 larger roses up for you next, the first of which is very bold and beautiful. This is the little known from David Austin LDBraithway, a really large rose reaching around 5 to 5.5 feet. It has absolutely enormous red crimson blooms which are really quite delicate, so don't be tempted to put this one into a high traffic area or somewhere where it's going to take a little bit of wind, because although it will survive very well and still bloom, this one is planted on an east aspect right against the cottage where it only receives around 3 or 4 hours worth of direct sunlight a day early in the morning, still flowering profusely and looking absolutely stunning. But it's not going to take very much wind and it will get beaten about. The blooms actually, I'm going to do this, it's going to make my heart, but they do actually really snap very easily. You can hear that crunch down there and you're left with these hanging on the stem. So don't be tempted to put LDBraithway into a high traffic area where it's going to get knocked by children or pets, because it simply won't stand up to that. But LDBraithway are really useful, very vibrant, large rose, but it's quite large. That's going to take reach about 5 feet, 5.5 feet tall, but is going to do really well if you can only give it a couple of hours of direct sunlight per day. Another one for adding a real beautiful splash of colour to a dark or shady spot in the garden. Again, a fairly tall rose reaching 5 to 5.5 feet. This buttery, creamy yellow beauty is Imogen. I have mine growing on a northeast aspect where it receives only about 4.5 to 5 hours worth of direct sunlight per day, and it flowers really well. It comes up nice and tall and is very beautiful at the back of a border. So again, making my top 6 roses for growing in shade is Imogen. Another fabulous rose which appears all over these collections, which does really well in dapple shade, is the very beautiful Crown Princess Margarita. Available as a short climber and as a shrub, this particular plant is really useful for putting depth and colour into the back of a shady border. Reaching around 5.5, sometimes onto 6 feet, it has long arching stems and beautiful apricot fragrant blooms, but does well if you can only give it 4 or 5 hours worth of sunlight per day. Don't forget, all of the roses we've talked about in this collection have their own individual rose reviews, so if you can't find what you're looking for, please leave me a comment and I'll point you in the direction that you're looking for. Please feel free to like, follow and share. I've been Gardener Ben, and this is my top 6 recommended roses for growing in shade or dappled sunlight.